Okay, Rich Van Tassel back with you, recording audio as well for WBJL Radio and Yes You. Continuing with our Week 1 NFL picks. Part 2 here, Cleveland Browns going to Philadelphia to play the Eagles. Injuries for the Browns. Marcus Burley, defensive back, questionable. For the Philadelphia Eagles, 2 listed as out. Connor Wojak, defensive tackle, and Bryce Treggs, wide receiver. Philadelphia, Carson Wentz is getting the start, the rookie. Let's see how recovered he is from that rib injury first. Then let's see what game he can bring to the table. For Cleveland Browns, Hugh Jackson, a very good offensive mind, of course. We saw him as a head coach in Oakland. That was a dysfunctional situation. Cleveland was also is also a dysfunctional situation. So let's see if he can be a head coach and not just an offensive coordinator. Robert Griffin III, let's see what he has, if he can bring anything, if he can actually be a future plan for the Cleveland Browns, or if he's just there to fill space in the meantime. With this game, I like the fact that Cleveland has a better offensive line than I believe Philadelphia does, and with 2 weaker teams, Cleveland, we discussed it in the season preview, they have more talent and more high-end players at positions, such as the Joe Hayden, such as the Joe Thomases of the world. Josh Gordon will not be able to play, but when he's on the field, he's certainly good. So I like Cleveland to win this game. I think Carson Wentz is going to struggle. I like it 24-13 in favor of the Cleveland Browns getting off to a 1-0 start. Next up, the Atlanta Falcons are hosting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Injuries first for the visiting Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Kevon Cartwright, tight end, questionable. Devontae Bond, linebacker, questionable. Mike James, running back, injury reserve. Kenny Bell, wide receiver, questionable. For the Atlanta Falcons, Keanu Neal, safety, out. Devin Lewis Fuller, wide receiver, is on injury reserve. Teron Ward, running back, questionable. Tyler Starr, linebacker, out. And Deshaun Golson, safety, questionable. Tampa Bay has very good young offensive talent. Vincent Jackson, Doug Martin, of course. And you have the second-year player now, Jameis Winston, last year's top overall pick. Big game for both teams early on. I think this will sway which one of these teams will finish second and potentially make a playoff run in the NFC South. I like Atlanta at home. I expect them to run the ball better. Tampa Bay's defense is going to have a nightmare with Julio Jones, as do most defenses in the league. Matt Ryan's going to be able to find him. And I don't think Tampa Bay is quite ready to win these type of games yet, but they will towards the end of the season. I think next year would be more of the springboard for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think they're just a little short now. It should be relatively high scoring. Again, we talked about the lack of sharpness in last night's game, so there's a potential for this one, but I like it high scoring in the area of 30-23 in favor of the Atlanta Falcons. Next up, the Tennessee Titans are hosting the Minnesota Vikings. Injuries for the visiting Vikings. Of course, we know that Teddy Bridgewater is done for the season. The rest are listed as questionable. Charles Johnson, wide receiver. Nick Easton, center. Xavier Rhodes, cornerback. Jerick McKinnick, running back. For the Tennessee Titans, Josiah Matias and Byron Bell, both offensive linemen, a guard and offensive tackle, are on injury reserve. Kendall Wright is out. Tennessee's line is actually not that terrible. However, with Byron Bell out, it's going to certainly affect that. Chance Warmack is good. They brought in DeMarco Murray. I expect him to play much better than he did in Philadelphia, obviously, though he won't be at his form that he was with the Dallas Cowboys. For the Minnesota Vikings, I'm expecting Sam Bradford to start, and I think there's enough to be a very poor Tennessee Titans team in this situation. Tennessee isn't terrible up the middle. They have some good defensive tackles, so I don't expect Adrian Peterson to go nuts, but we know Minnesota is going to be force-feeding him the ball in this game, which will eventually wear the defense down for the Tennessee Titans and get Minnesota to win this game. Tennessee's offense just not there yet. I don't think Mariota is quite there yet either. That's why I'm picking a low-scoring game for the Tennessee Titans. I like this one to be 24-10 in favor of the Minnesota Vikings. Next up, the Oakland Raiders travel to New Orleans to play the Saints. Injuries for the visiting Oakland Raiders. Austin Howard, offensive tackle, is questionable. For the New Orleans Saints, Sheldon Rankins, the defensive tackle, is on injury reserve. Terron Armstead, offensive tackle, questionable. Donnell Ellerbe, linebacker, questionable. Michael Thomas, wide receiver, is questionable. The Oakland Raiders, a team I'm expecting a lot out of this season. It has to start right here. They cannot have a let up. New Orleans is not the team that they used to be. I know it's in New Orleans. It's a tough travel, West Coast to Central Time Zone, which in New Orleans is, so that's never really easy, but it's not all the way in the East Coast. And, you're coming out of training camp. You've had time to prepare for that. I would have been surprised had they not been camped out closer to New Orleans to not have to worry about that travel in the first place. But Derek Carr, this is a chance to really show that he's the right man for the job, and this entire Oakland Raiders team to show that they're serious this year, they're ready to go, and they're going to be able to come up with a quality win on the road against a lesser team. This is a professional type of game. Look for Oakland to approach it in that manner. They should be getting pressure on Drew Brees with Khalil Mack and Bruce Irvin, and the secondary is certainly good enough to neutralize that passing game by the New Orleans Saints, where they still have Drew Brees, and they're still certainly very capable of getting the job done in that regard. I think it'll be a little tougher for Oakland because New Orleans is at home. They'll have something to prove. They are a professional team, but the Raiders I expect to come out on top in this one, 27-23 late, but they're able to get the win and show that they're serious this year. Oakland Raiders 27-23. Next up, and our last for part 2, Kansas City Chiefs are hosting the San Diego Chargers. Injuries first for the visiting Chargers. Brock Hecking, linebacker, is on injury reserve. Joey Bosa, the defensive end, questionable. He was, of course, their top overall pick. Didn't get much time in training camp. And Jason Verrett, their cornerback, is questionable. Jamal Charles, running back for the Chiefs, only one listed as questionable. Home game for Kansas City. Very tough place to play. And especially when you open up the season there. Either, whether it's their first home game and not necessarily their first game or just their first home game in general. And San Diego is not that good. Even the best part of San Diego is their passing game, and Marcus Peters I expect to have a shutdown performance in this game and really, of course, take the next steps. We talked about Marcus Peters. Alex Smith, even without Jamal Charles, Charkandrick West certainly showed he is capable. They're going to keep it simple in this game, maybe come out with a few early big plays to try to catch San Diego, lesser San Diego team off guard. But look for them to not do anything too complicated because they're much more talented than the San Diego Chargers, and they should be able to get the win without any problem. So Kansas City in this one, 27-17. All right, so we are done now with part 2. We will be coming just a little later and give you the rest of the games for Sunday. Be sure to stay tuned for that. Thank you all so much.